So
Sorry.
Danya reminded us of the IEP head count. And so Dr. Sane always says, if you're not sure, pause the meeting. Well, if you're working on a deadline and you're not going to get that IEP reeval done, and that kid drops off the head count, it costs money. So one of the things that I've often recommended, it don't wait till the last minute to start scheduling all this stuff. Start at 60 days out rather than 30 days. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no rules against that. Started at 60 rather than 30. And don't be just grabbing. Again, you can't just grab anybody walking down the hall. And if the reg ed teacher doesn't show up, you need to postpone, because the FERPA rules on privacy. You can't just have somebody that doesn't have standing sitting in on kids' IEP. So you got to keep up with your timelines, your head counts. Same thing with intervention. But intervention is not quite as strict as EC is. Tamala talked about employee assistance, and as she pointed out, it helps with retention. Now, sometimes that's a bad thing, and I've told you that story. I inherited a crack addict in Charlotte. She'd been hired knowing she was a crack addict for one of those special funded programs, Project Success. Well, she went off the wagon right after I got there, and because she was in EAP, I couldn't get rid of her. I couldn't do anything. But you say, well, Dale, that sounds awfully hard. Well, but because she was in EAP, I couldn't even get a long-term sub. All I could do was a day-to-day sub, and it was a very bad situation for 8 months. So while it can be bad, most of the time it's helpful on teacher retention, and that's a big thing now. Tamala mentioned the ethics of fundraising. No such thing. That's like Bigfoot or a Yeti. There is no such thing as ethical fundraising. I've told you bad stuff that I used to do. Fundraising in itself is unethical because you provide less value than the money they give you. That's the margin. That's how you make money. So there is no ethics. Now, is it legal? Yes, but ethical? No. Avoid it at all possible. Fundraising is not an ethical business. Letitia pointed out that budgeting is supposed to follow your priorities of your school improvement plan, your school improvement team. And budgeting doesn't mean dividing the money equally. It's just, that's the problem with Leandro, is it divides the money equally. And so that in the end, some people don't end up with what they need. But again, when you're budgeting, you have to make decisions, and that's sometimes hard. Letitia talked about being careful about when you discipline EC students. We all know that there's a different set of rules. Now, one of the things that, and when we do the EC slideshow in a few minutes, that really bothers me is that we can't get this notion of the 10 days, and I'm going to cover that rant will be later. What constitutes a change in placement? And we'll talk about that one later. Remember, on sexual crimes, school administrators are not qualified to do the investigations. And here's the thing: this is the gray area that turns red real quick on me. A kid comes in and says, somebody said something nasty to me, sexually harassing to me. And you think, well, now wait a minute, that's just verbal, that's just sexual harassment. I can look into that one. I don't have to tell my resource officer. I'll handle this myself. And then when you call the kid in to question him, he said, well, he grabbed me and then what? He grabbed you and then he said this to me. As soon as the physical part comes, you've made a mistake. Because now that's no longer sexual harassment, that's a sexual assault. I don't care if a kid came to me and said, somebody said, first thing I'd do is get the resource officer. And I would make sure the police were there from the very outset of that. I've told you the story at North Meck, where the Huntersville police said, we're quite sure something happened, but since the school initiated an investigation, we don't feel comfortable with the evidence now, and so we're going to have to let the kid go. And told that on TV. And we didn't have any choice but to clean house on the administrative team, because the police threw them under the bus. And they'll do that. Don't anything sexual, have the police with you, even if it's verbal. Make sure that they're there. Kristen talked about using grants to bridge money gaps in a follow-up reflection to case study 2. Here's the problem with grants. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Let me explain that to you. Who knows what the concept of, this is 2 words now, in kind, I-N space, K-I-N-D. When it comes to grants, who understands or who knows what in kind means? All right. A lot of people want to get federal grants because they have the least amount of in kind contribution from the grant recipient. In kind means I give you this money, and in kind you give me goods, services, personnel, or you match the money. A lot of private grants are one-on-one matching, and federal grants allow you to take more of the money for your administrative overhead. So pass-through money. You get a grant and you're going to administer $100,000. Who's going to administer it? Well, your payroll department or your purchasing department. It costs you 7%. It costs you $7 for every 100 personnel costs. What some grants won't let you spend but 5% on administration. You lose money. You have to pay people. You can't pay them out of the grant. That's in kind. You got to come up with the money. Or we'll give you 100,000, but you got to match 50, or you got to give us personnel a position. That's the problem with grants, is schools that need the money because they can't afford the things they want don't have the ability to do the in-kind portion of grants. So that's why everybody tries to get federal grants, because they are the most generous in terms of the least amount of in-kind, either personnel or money matching money, and they'll let you spend usually up to about 15% on overhead, and that's about what it costs sometimes to administer the grant. Sometimes they want an independent evaluation of the grant, and they want you to pay for it. That's the in-kind piece. So grants are not just manna from heaven. It didn't just fall out of the sky. I'm telling you, you better know on grants what you're getting yourself into. I did one with Gaston County, finished it up last spring, but it cost me $120,000 out of my budget. They gave us 120, but they wanted it matched. And that's what I did. I found the money and matched it where the president allowed me to. And we trained 14 administrators for them for the price of 7. So, I mean, that's what we're talking about. A lot of local grants expect in kind. Know the rules up front before you get yourself into that stuff. Wanda remind us that your fundraising can't compete with food service. I used to sell candy all day, but you better not now. You get caught now. Jeff reminded us probably best not to get into the food service business or selling food because of all the allergies nowadays. That's a good call, Jeff. I mean, I've never seen, you carry a peanut through a school cafeteria now and 12 kids fall out on the floor. I've never seen anything like it. I would not be in the food business because of food allergies nowadays. Wanda did not know that in the local budget and the state budget that the district allots to you, any unspent money reverts back to them at the end of the fiscal year, and added bonus, they subtract that amount from your next year's allotment. Let me say that again. At the end of the year, you've got an account, a state account or a local account that's got $1,000 in it. They take it, and next year your allotment's $1,000 less. Got to understand that. That's the way budgeting works. So you have to be careful. And so that's why you make a budget with your school improvement team at the beginning of the year, and you plan how you're going to spend every nickel of it. You don't just, here we got this money, we'll figure out what we're going to do along the year. Now, I don't want to call Randy out for his principal, but his principal said something, or the quote was, now, I sometimes ask the assistant principal when I make out the budget, but I don't, too many cooks in the kitchen. School improvement team is not too many cooks. and you plan what you're going to spend all along. Because if you spend too much, you get in trouble. But if you spend too little, your school does without, and next year they double do without. They get dinged the next year. You got to plan your money out, and the school improvement team is not too many cooks in the kitchen. You need to involve them. Danya commented in her case study reflection that the case studies are a conscious mind shift, and they are. That's the whole notion here. We're trying to change your life. Melody did an excellent job on the EC protocol and how to do scripting as the LEA rep. Now, I had a couple of folks that mentioned, well, the assistant principal and the principal were both in the IAP meeting, and the principal never did say anything, which is appropriate. Why? Why didn't the principal say anything if the AP was in there doing all the talking and all the participating? Why? Why didn't the principal say anything?
They should be in agreement, shouldn't they?
They should be quiet.
I mean, they're in agreement with the.
Well, I mean, they
yeah,
can
I'm assuming.
disagree, but do it quietly. Why?
Yeah.
Only one person can be the LEA rep, right? If you have a duplicate like that, one of them's got to be quiet. Now they can sit, the principal has standing. They can sit and listen to what's going on. But now you can't both get in there and get involved and start offering and voting and doing all that, because all of a sudden there's a power imbalance. Remember that? Everybody gets a vote. What happens if the LEA gets 2 votes? What happens to the power balance? Or if they start, offering their opinions or giving argument or debate or whatever. So it's perfectly fine for the AP and the principal to both attend, but now they flip a coin or do whatever, rock, paper, scissors for all I care. But only one of them needs to be talking and voting. There, nowhere in the legislation are you allowed 2 LEA reps so that you can put your thumb on the scale on the balance of power. So it's perfectly normal for a principal to show up, but the AP is still the LEA rep and is the voting member of the team, scripts and make sure that they're alert and participating in the meeting. Jasmine did a good job of scripting on her she meets. Tanya talked about MTSS. She did a good job summarizing it on a short. What is MTS? The 3 tiers. It's a short one, but it's a really good one. She had all the good stuff. Tremaine said you better learn this stuff because you may have to be the LEA rep. No, you may not have to be. You will be. If you become an AP, you will be the LEA rep. Nobody avoids that because nobody wants to do it. You will be that person. Remember, Carolina said, remember, no one person holds the power in the IEP meeting, one person, one vote. And you can't do that by filling up the room with extra teachers or administrators so that you can, and I've seen that happen too. I have absolutely seen that happen where they gathered up everybody that would come so they could outvote, one side could outvote the other. That's what we're talking about. Can't do that. And that's why you can't have people who don't have standing in there. I like that Tanya pointed out that there usually is an hour of employment requirement for benefits. You need to know that you have some workers who are 30 hours, some who are 25, some are 37 and a half. Some districts try to put things together like being a custodian part of the day and then bus driver or captain, but you got to be careful. Back in 1992, it was found that we had a lot of teacher assistants that were driving the bus too, and they were hourly employees, and we got in a lot of trouble statewide in North Carolina and we had to either pay them all that back overtime that they had accrued, or we had to let them go home and not work the last 2 months of school and still get their paycheck. And that's what county that I was in. I was in Burke at that time. And so from April and May, I didn't have any teacher assistants because most of them drove the bus. So you got to be careful. You got to know who gets benefits and what the overtime rules are. That's a good catch. Yeah, and then Josh had a really good one on the flow chart on the golden ticket on the hiring. I like that one. Now, I've not done a good enough job on the skip, and so I'm going to cover that. It's a very simple thing. When you put names of persons responsible on your abbreviated graphic organizer on task 2 or your full on task 3, when it says human resources or human capital and persons responsible, I need to see names, not positions. Now, what we're trying to do, if you'll remember, is we're trying to get you prepared to do your school improvement plan. And here are the rules for the school improvement plan. You can't put anything on your school improvement plan. This is where we teach this part. Can't put anything on there that you don't have the money in hand or the personnel in hand to run it. Let me say that again. You can't say, well, we're going to have a fundraiser later this year, and on our school improvement plan, we're going to buy microscopes with it. No. Do you have the money now? No. Then that don't go on your plan. Do you have the people? It's going to take an extra person to do this. We're hoping to get a grant and hire that person. No. ESSER funds are gone. One of our students, that I stayed late with last night and let them present their case study 3 because a couple of them going to be gone. She said she's on the 3rd year of a ESSER fund grant, and her position dries up. You've got to know what it's going to take to pull this program off. And if you don't have the money in, so now can her position go back on the school improvement plan as the MTSS coach and facilitator for next year as one of their academic initiatives? No, they don't have the money. The grant's up. That's not going to happen. You got to get in the habit. And when you're asked to identify both those fiscal and human resources, you have to tell them exactly the dollar figure. It has to have a dollar sign in front, and you have to name the person by name who's going to be responsible for that. Teachers never did anything. Just, who's going to do this? Teachers. What teachers? When? How they know that? So you got to get in the habit, because you're going to have to fill out a school improvement plan one of these days. You got to get in the habit of when it asks you for resources that you use dollar figures and people's names. So I should see those. I usually let it slide on task 2 and remind you to do it on the full one on 3, but either one of those. I need to see names in that marketing plan. We're getting ourselves in the habit now that we've talked about budget this semester. We're getting ourselves in the habit of understanding that you can't be vague. We're going to raise the money. How? Well, we don't know that, but we're going to get the money and do. No, you're not. No, you're not. And they'll send it back to you. Now, understanding when you do your school improvement plan every year, the central office sends you a template that came straight from DPI. That's where I've been today, is DPI all day. I'd rather had a bunion than been there all day, but I've been at DPI all day today. I'm on the commission for principal preparation. Oh, it's brutally bad. Oh my. But DPI is like the central office in your school district. They interpret and follow out the rules and policies of the state school board and the General Assembly, the legislature. And so I'm on the commission for principal preparation. I represent the private school, the private colleges. Dr. I'm having a senior mom. Dr. Harner represents Chapel. She's one for public schools, and she's from Chapel Hill. And so they have colleges there. We're there, superintendents, the DPI people. The state superintendent came in and worked with us a while this morning. Politicians like her, but DPI, all the different people. But But the notion here is all this stuff tracks back to either law or policy. And so they send the templates out to all these different templates and all these different rubrics. Like they send the one out where you project your graduation rate. You can't change that stuff. You can't. It has to be in the form they send it. They send all the attendance format for average daily attendance. They design all that stuff. The disciplinary data manual. I told you I helped write the first one with Ken Gaddis. Back, soon be what 14, 15 years ago, we wrote the first one of those because I was the biggest user of data. But when they send that stuff out, it has the power of the law and policy, the school board and the General Assembly behind it. You can't ignore it. So you say, well, this just came from the central office. No, they're not the ones who made it. DPI sent it to them, then we in the central office send it to you. And it has to be right or it gets rejected. So you've got to get in the habit of understanding that when they send you this stuff, it can't just be close enough or in the ballpark kind of stuff. This is all very legal. Tabari pointed out today, Tabari is a special assistant to the state superintendent. He was principal of the year a couple of years back. But Tabari, he was in my group today, and we were doing some work on one of the standards. And he was talking about, that's what you've heard me say, you money or you honey. We really got to work with people on following the rules and knowing the budgets and all those things. And I said, well, Tabari, you should be with me tonight. I'm going to go over that again. That's what we're working on this semester. And so, but the bigger issue, the overarching issue is when you get sent documents from your central office, 9 times out of 10, they came straight from DPI or your Department of Education in South Carolina. And they've already decided what the metrics are, what the rubrics are, what the rules are. If you're unsure, you need to ask, but you can't just say, well, I'm just going to put this on here. You're making a mistake. You make sure you're following the rules and you'll be fine. All right, before we get into EC tonight, I'm looking over. So again, those were the stars of the week, really good stuff. Remember, I read you stuff every day. I want to talk about our next case study. Now, in the first case study, who was the bad guy?
The
The
teacher.
teacher.
The teacher. All right. In the second case study, who was the bad guy?
Superintendent.
Superintendent. All right. Third case study, who's the bad guy? We swung around to the principal. I told you, I'm an equal opportunity hater. We'll get them all before the semester is over. In the first one, it's the principal and superintendent were clean in the first one. It was all on the teacher. This was a rogue teacher. The second one, the superintendent, he went off the mark in the second one. This one is the principal. Finally, we got around. Some of you that are still classroom based are happy. Finally, the principal's the bad guy. The principal's the bad guy in this one. Now, what I need for you to understand about this case study. Do you remember in OMA Task 1, I had you do a special POPs audit of your special populations? You remember that? We call those protected class of individuals. They have a federal protected class designation. While the content of case study 3 is LGBTQ to gay kids, are they protected class under federal law? Yes, they are. And so we could apply the same standards of this case to any of those 6 special populations groups that we identified at the beginning of this semester. You have to understand those special props, that's a federal program. And it means more than just the feds pay for it. It means they have special protections. EC Kids 504 have IDA, FAPE, and FERPA. So, you got to understand that. And so, while the content of this case is LGBTQ, this applies to any federally protected class of students in your building. Got to get that. That's the part you got to make that connection. Now, this one is about your personal truth. Can you put what your personal convictions are aside and do your job and follow the law in the face of parents who are misbehaving, in the face of kids who are misbehaving? Can you do what you need to do? Now, full disclosure, this one starts out with the notion of antecedent behaviors. Who remembers what antecedent behaviors is? The little things that become the big things. So the little thing that started this, that set this one off is Jimmy and Willie's public displays of affections were ignored. And it got out of hand and got the community inflamed. Now, should we let boys and girls do that or just stop gay kids from doing it? We got to be consistent. We have to make sure everybody. If we told the gay kids they couldn't do any affection, but we let the straight kids, which of the standards would that violate that we've talked about each week? Arbitrary or capricious? If we punish the gay kids but not the straight kids for exactly the same thing, is that arbitrary or capricious? That would be arbitrary, right? Remember, me and Tanya are out back smoking and Kristen catches us. She sends Tanya back to class and shoots me. Well, the arbitrary part is she punished me and not Tanya, right? The capricious part is while smoking's bad for you and I'm not a smoker, seems a little excessive to shoot me for smoking. Well, this case had the first part of it was the arbitrary. She only enforced she didn't enforce it against anybody. She let them get to the point where the antecedent behaviors ate them up. So on one hand, we don't want to be arbitrary or capricious, but on the other, when you had a duty or a responsibility to act and didn't, which of the feasances is that in negligence? Misfeasance, malfeasance, or non-feasance when you had a duty to act and didn't? That's to be non-feasance. That's exactly right, Alicia. Because what does the state manual say? It says that's a violation. We don't allow that in our school. Now, your local code of conduct meters out the punishment, whatever it is, the consequence between this range and this range. But the state says we don't allow inappropriate public displays of affection because we know that leads to what? Sexual offenses. And those persistently dangerous things tend to happen if we let them get out of control. I told you we had a middle school where it was just the PDAs. I'd never seen anything like it. We needed a fire hose to wet them down. The next thing you know, there was 8 rapes that had been on the bus. Yeah, 8. 8. It was a horrific scandal, but that's what happens. So in this case, Jimmy and Willie are out of control. Don't rein them in, and then the community gets upset. Parents come in. Now, what federal law does it violate if me and Randy are in a conversation about Sean's child? Neither one of us are the parent of that child. Can we be talking to a parent about somebody else's child? No, that's a FERPA violation.
FERPA.
Now, what about the new Family Privacy Act that just got put in that gives regular ed kids the same privileges as FERPA? Can you talk about anybody's kid? No.
Mm-mm.
No. And so when they come in and want to start talking and start making, now, you notice that communicating threats, according to the state manual, while it's a UB, it also carries a suffix that has a law designation that's a violation of the law. If a parent comes in and starts making bullying or threatening statements about somebody else's child, what do? You call the police. You get your resource officer. You can't let them in front of you break the law. You can't allow the threats and the bullying that goes on. All right. So this case is about antecedent behaviors that got out of control. Now it has spun into a whole world of hurt. Principal calls them in and she's talking to them like maybe they're smokers. like you would say to kids, wait till you get home to smoke or wait till after school's out. She asked them to wait till after school was out to be gay. And I was like, I don't think it works that way. I'm not sure, but I don't believe it does. So that was unreasonable to ask them to wait to be gay. And uh, and then she invoked heckler's veto, which is a violation of federal law. What is heckler's veto? That's when the loudest and stupidest gets their way and threatens their way to get what they want. So me and Emmy are involved in we're involved in some kind of an altercation, and Emmy is a lot more popular than I am. So they call me in. This happened over at the skating rink. And the principal calls me in and says, I'm going to send you home for a couple of days. Well, why? Me and Emmy, we had words over at the skating rink. Well, Emmy's a lot more popular than you, and a lot of people have said that they're going to beat you up if you come back to school. So I'm going to send you home. I'm going to punish you. So the notion here on heckler's veto is punishing the victim. People were threatening Jimmy and Willie, and the principal's response, rather than punishing the people who were doing the threatening and the bullying and calling the police, was to tell Jimmy and Willie, for your own good, I'm punishing you. I'm letting the loudest and the stupidest have their way. And I'm punishing you, the victim. That's called heckler's veto. Is what she says to Jimmy and Willie a veiled threat? Of course it is. If you come to the prom, they're going to beat the stuffing out of you. That's not even a veiled threat. That's pretty much a threat. And what she's saying is I'm not going to stop. I'm going to let them if you come, because you're causing an uproar in the community, and I don't want to have to deal with all these angry parents. If they come, if you come to the prom, I'm going to let them beat the stuffing out of you. And so the principal is wrong on every front. Now you say, but I don't support that life. It's not about supporting that lifestyle. It's about federally protected classes of students. And I've told you, in the interview process for a job, at some point you're going to be asked if there's a law or policy that you don't agree with, that you think is, that you don't like or is against your value system. Will you still uphold it? And the answer is yes. That's what we hired you to do, was uphold law and policy. So this principal has let her personal truth and her political truth, which is her tribe. Somebody, we were talking after class. We did, as I said, I had a presentation last night. I let them stay on and do it. And they were talking about how relevant this was. I said, would you believe 5 or 6 years ago, people said I should quit using this one. This was a decided issue. And I was like, no, it's not a decided issue. I thought, abortion was the law of the land for 50 years and it went away. So, don't think that these things don't matter, but the law is still out there. The principal did threaten the kids. Heckler's veto was involved. The loudest and stupid abridged the rights of the others. Yes, you would have to let them come to prom. And so the question that I always ask at the end of that case is this. Would you let them have the LGBTQ club? And the answer is yes, you have to do that. And so then, would you assign a teacher to be their advisor? Absolutely. What is all your teacher contracts or when you were teachers? It says any other duties assigned by the principal, right? How does this differ from supervision schedule to cover a ball game or a talent show or other clubs? These kids, if they're coming after school, they've got a club. Do they have to be supervised? Absolutely. Just like I've told you, you can't put the sign-up sheet for evening duties in the teacher's lounge and hope people sign up. That's the fastest way to lose your job and your house. You have to assign these people duty. They're not going to volunteer to come and do this stuff. And so you can't have any qualms. If they have the club, they're legally allowed to have the club. They have one, then you got to find somebody to do that. Absolutely. You would have to do that. That's just one of the super, you've got a master schedule of classes, you've got a duty roster of the duties that teachers have to pull during the day: car duty, bus duty, hall duty, lunchroom duty, bathroom duty. And then you've got a supervision schedule where you have to have adult supervision of all your after school activities. This is one of them. No different than the Key Club or the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. No different. You've got to assign somebody to cover this. So, this case study is about a principal that let things get out of control, antecedent behaviors, and then broke the law in multiple ways, trying to make up for when forced by parents. She made bad decisions. She made really bad decisions. She broke federal and state law. So that's our next case study for next week. So let's talk about exceptional children for a while tonight. Now, who's the exceptional children's teacher in this bunch that knows more than me? I know there's got to be one. Kristen, it's you. I know you got to know more than me. And I want to talk about a couple of things that came up last night, but then I'm going to show some slides here. With MTSS last night, this is my understanding, and it's Liz's too, who's an MTSS person and knows EC. It is not illegal for a kid to get both intervention services and EC if it's written into their IEP. The trick is where you get in trouble is if you stop one or the other and there's a gap. That's when you get in trouble. It is not against the law for a kid that's in third level intervention to also be receiving EC services. We have some reason we think that's that they have to get one or the other. No, they don't. If it's in their IEP, there's a continuation or a continuum of services. You got to understand that. That's why you got to work. Your intervention team has to work with EC. And I said this, and people kind of looked shocked when I said this. When a kid gets to the second tier in intervention, that's after the 30 days of anecdotals. When they get to the second tier, we start the actual interventions. When they get there, I want you to hear me clearly on this now. When they get to that second tier of interventions, they get the same rights and privileges as if they're already placed in the EC program. You got to understand that. They get the same rights and privileges if they were identified because they're receiving services now. Some people think, well, we don't have to do this or don't have to do that. They've not even been tested for EC, but when they start receiving services under free and appropriate education, they get the same rights. No, they're not placed. That doesn't put them in the EC program. But the same things that you would do for EC kids, you better do for them. You better have an IEP. You better have a plan. You better meet. You better do all that stuff. Okay? All right. So that's a couple clarifications as more and more school districts are supposed to have already implemented MTSS, but really haven't. But those are a couple of the biggies. So let me share my screen with some websites on here. And this is not only for you to share with your parents, but this is a really good one on IDEA and the facts on this one. And this is a really good one. It has all your laws and policies. You should spend some time with this one. This is, again, the link is under Zoom session 8. But this is all about IDEA. You need to understand that. Here's the one on FERPA. Again, you need to dive into this one because guess what? Now all the regular ed kids get these same protections in terms of, just having ex parte conversations out in the hallway. That's a violation. So that one's there. That's a really good one. But here's the one that you better spend some time with. This one right here. The Parent Information and Resource Centers, because Parent has this, and it has everything that we talk about, the 10 basic steps, key terms, parental rights under IDEA, evaluating, all these things. Look at this: placement, behavior, that's the functional behavior assessment and the behavior intervention plan. It's all here, folks. Everything is right here in one handy dandy place. This one is really good. You can learn more from this one than about anything else that I can think of. I mean, it all about the IEP. If you're not an EC person, this is the best place to go and learn. All right. Now, I've got a PowerPoint, but now full disclosure, this thing is 63 slides long. You need to spend some time with it. I'm not going to tonight, but here's the deal. If you don't know what kind of program you have at your school, you need to find out. And that's why you were to do the audit. If you don't know what the difference in inclusion and mainstreaming is, you need to know. Now, the inclusion model is what most everybody's gone to. And one of the things that I hear students in this program say, and even folks out in the building say, is it's not, kids don't get as good a services as they got in the old mainstreaming model. And to which I reply, duh. We didn't switch to get better services. We switched because inclusion costs 30% less. It's simply a money saver that meets the letter of the law. It's not a better model. It's a less effective model. And that's one of the reasons why we're having to do so much MTSS now, is because the inclusion model is not very good, but it's cheap and it meets the letter of the law. So if you don't know the difference, and I'm only going to look at the first slide here, if you don't know the difference, mainstreaming is the old one where we would pull kids out with an EC teacher, and then we would put them in regular ed classes. They didn't get any services in those classes. We'd send them to PE and art with the regular kids, and then we would pull them out with the EC teacher the rest of the day, different classes. Inclusion is the kids don't move, the teacher does. The EC teacher goes to the classroom and collaborates and supports the regular ed teacher in the classroom model. Now, our last case study is going to be about this, but it touches everything that we've covered this semester. But it's about parents pitching a fit about an inclusion model, not doing good staff development, not doing that long-term parent activity from the skip where you bring them in and teach your parents about the inclusion model. You know, think about it. What are we required to do every year with Title I parents? We have one of those parent information meetings, don't we? But we don't do that a lot of times with inclusion. We don't tell parents what they're getting. Now, the last case, the principal is a dud again, but there's several duds in the last one. The teacher's a dud. You know, there's several duds in it. It's an equal opportunity insult for the last case study, but it touches everything that we've talked about. But it's about the inclusion model is kind of, and now I've said it in Peru, so it'll throw you for a loop, but don't get caught up in that. Doesn't matter where it happened. And so the inclusion model is hard. And now you have to integrate it with your MTSS. But if you're planning ahead, that it helps support the inclusion model. MTSS supports that. But truthfully, the reason why we had to get so invested in MTSS is the inclusion model is just not as good as the old mainstreaming model, but it's a lot cheaper. And so at this time, I'm going to go to our resident expert. I'll stop my share before we get into the big one. All right, Kristen, what have I told so far that's in error? I know I've said something wrong. I know I had to.
No, you're spot on. It's interesting how special ed has changed in the last, because I've only been doing this for 12 years. So not very, well, this is my 12th year, so not very long, but even in that process, how different it is, because initially through what now is MTSS, we used to call SIT. And so
Yep.
back then, so when I first started, if the child did have an IEP and let's say they were evaluated in reading and they qualified under a learning disability for reading, but they started struggling in math, then yes, they just passed off, that child just automatically got services in the IEP for specialized instruction in math. But now you're exactly right. And a lot of teachers do have, especially some of our resource teachers now, because they are having to do so much inclusion, that trying to find time to actually fit in the pull-out services that some students still need, because that's been, the inclusion shift has really been eye-opening, especially at the elementary level.
Yeah.
Because for example, this year, they're at my school in particular, they're trying to do inclusion with kindergarten and first grade. Well, we all know at those levels, that's when you're learning to read. So that's all those rote skills. So you
Yeah.
either have it or you don't. So having that child in there who has no idea the letters of the alphabet in kindergarten, inclusion is really not making a bit of a difference for that child. So it has been, it's just ever, it's ever evolving, but that's
Yeah.
education in general. But it is interesting. I didn't think about the financial piece of inclusion, though. That makes even more sense because you're having a hard enough time staffing special ed in general. And the turnover is pretty big.
It's a
I'm
deal.
sure we all.
It absolutely is.
So
Well,
I think,
so what the federal government is trying to do is pull back on the money they spend, because by far exceptional children is the most expensive thing in the federal Department of Education by a long shot. And they want to pull back and have the state and local go up. So that's why we've gone to the intervention, because they cut 30% out of the budget. And this now, the children's advocates have gone crazy over it, as they should have. But if it meets the letter of the law, and they've been pretty consistent winning in court, but the inclusion model is not as good. The deal, as Kristen said, is your intervention is supposed to pick up where and help fill those gaps. I'm not sure why we think that we ought to be providing intervention for things that kids haven't learned yet. But we're trying to get ahead of the curve. I understand that, but I'm not sure that really does get ahead of the curve in down in the lower grades. But we're doing some crazy things now. One of the things that I will say, because parents have lost, who was it? Because parents have lost their mind, I guess. And all of them want their kid placed autistic rather than intellectually disabled or SLD, or one of the learning disabilities. It's much less stigma attached to autism. That's kind of the problem du jour nowadays. The problem with that autistic placement is autistic kids are above average in functioning. SLD and ID kids are not. They're both well below average. And we're malpracticing on kids because parents want their kids, parents, folks, this is not the dollar menu at McDonald's. You don't get to pick and choose what your kid is. But that's what they think it's about now. And so unfortunately, MTSS is having to try to fill some of those gaps as well. And those kids that are completely misplaced, because that's the parents pitch to fit and that's what they want. But I would say, and this is completely anecdotal, I have no data to support this, and nor could I get any. I'd say that 70% of the kids or more that place autistic are not autistic. Not even close. It's just to appease parents. And then you understand, with those autistic kids, they don't get that direct instruction like we're talking about with ID kids or SLD kids. They don't get that. And so, and because the inclusion model is so much less already, we're placing a large burden on MTSS and intervention to try to help these actually learning disabled kids that aren't getting the services because their parents, it hurts their pride too much for their kid to be learning disabled. And it's a whole lot easier on them to say, my kid's autistic. That's a lot more popular. Jeff, you got something for us?
Yeah, so I'm in CMS, and the one that frustrates me the most is MTSS and CMS. Tier 1 is classroom instruction based. We reach all kids, but when they get to Tier 2, they're doing interventions that are like Dreambox or iReady that are not teacher strategy based.
Yeah, and that's when they get the same potential. And thank you for pointing that out. I know this is not your point, but Jeff just has pointed out, when the strategies are still classroom based in Tier 1, they're just regular. They're like regular ed kids. But when that leaves that classroom based, it's no longer, they now get basically the same protections as that you would give in the same system that you would give EC kids. Thank you for pointing that out much more articulately than I did. But the problem is now. All right, pick up with the problem statement that you
Okay,
had.
so, but how, I mean, child learn from a technology intervention like iReady or a computer-based program when we know that teachers in the classroom have the best understand a good solid understanding of where they are to implement those instructional strategies to actually raise the achievement gap.
Again, it's cost, time, ease, numbers. That's exactly what it is. Because if we went, remember, level 1, I was in a conversation about this today. It's an arcane reference that you folks are too young to get, but you understand that when we go to level 2, how much more intensive, how much more teacher time, how much support that would take. That's why we do the computer stuff, because again, it meets the letter of the law. It's not as good as the level 1 stuff, but if we put teachers to doing level 2 interventions, oh my Lord, they would not be able to ever touch the regular ed kids in their classroom. They'd spend all their time doing intervention if they had to do level 2 and 3 interventions. That's
Even in a small group, even in a small group, during small
even in
group time.
small groups. It's so time intensive. It's so time intensive that, and see, that was a discussion that Liz and I had last night. That's the problem when you get to tier 2 interventions. And she's an interventionist and MTSS coordinator for her school. And when you get to tier 2 interventions, they're so time consuming that the regular ed kids are not getting the basic education that the law says they're supposed to get. So in order to stay out of lawsuits from the regular ed parents, that's why we do the computer interventions, because it saves teachers time. Is it any good? No. It's the medical equivalent of spitting on it and rubbing it.
Because I mean, when I started teaching in 2013, we did RTI, and we were expected to
response to intervention,
differentiation,
and
small
you were expected to
groups.
skin your own cats, weren't you?
Yeah.
But we weren't doing RTI for every kid that came in the door. MTSS now, we got to do it for every kid comes in the door now. And I was in a rant today at DPI about, the dichotomy for principals is the report card is 80% proficiency and 20% growth, but everything, including MTSS with the requirement of it, is all about growth now. And we're spreading our resources way too thin. Way too thin. We're not getting the kids the intensive that they need. And if we do, then we're ignoring our regular ed kids in that same classroom. And so the answer to Jeff's questions, which is great question, why are we doing this foolishness with all this other things that we know aren't very effective? Time and money. Time and money. And keep us out of lawsuits with regular ed parents whose kids are being ignored. Our last case study is about the AG kids. The teacher in that room, in order to help her, because she had so many in there, she was having the AIG kids teach the EC kids. Oh, that's just so illegal. Well, they might put you under the jail for doing that. But that's what she did. That's what we're talking about. That she felt like that was the only option she had. Good Lord, you violated both of them's IEP. You know that AG kids have IEPs as well. They are exceptional children. Randy, what you got for us?
So I was, kind of responding to Jeffrey as well. Like in some of the meetings I've been on just through the clinical side, the whole iReady process and that, I think, they're using that. Even though I agree with you, I think that whole time aspect is the big thing, because what I've noticed is so many teachers are like, yes, this kid needs to be tier 3 and all that. And then our admin or that will be like, okay, show us the data. And then those small groups in that are not, they're not collecting data consistently, as in like iReady, You just pull up the student's name,
Yeah.
bada bing, here's
Yeah,
here's
it's
everything.
it's an excellent assessment tool, but you know, now I can speak to this singularly because those of you who have not seen me in person, I'm not sitting close to the screen and I fill it up. I am a large man. But here's what my question to you: if you want to fatten up a hog, do you feed him or do you weigh him? And see, the problem with iReady, it generates excellent assessment data, but it's weighing them, it's not feeding. And that's what we're talking, that's what Jeff's talking about here. It does an excellent job of telling you where you are with these kids, assessing them, but testing them won't they won't learn anymore. Are you feeding them or are you weighing them? And that's the issue. Teachers want to do it because it keeps them from having to spend all that time. And they do have, as Randy pointed out, have assessment data. But when you test them again next month because you haven't done any direct instruction, guess what? They test the same place and the gap only gets wider, to Kristen's point. See, you understand that time is a variable here. Oh God. When you get to be my doctoral students, and I teach you about analysis of variance when we're doing inferential statistics rather than descriptive, that's the higher level stuff. When I teach you about that, when you do an analysis of variance, time can't be a variable, but it can in a repeated measures analysis of variance. And what you learn in those is time can be your friend, but it can also be your enemy. If kids aren't moving up and they're just sitting still, as Kristen pointed out, the gap gets wider. It's not like they get dumber every day, but everybody else, while they're moving on the continuum and they're not, the gap widens back out again. And we don't, am I not right, Kristen, in that we don't use the discrepancy model anymore for placement, do we? See? And you get killed on that. You get killed. We don't use the discrepancy model. The gap keeps getting wider. And you say, well, the kids, is he getting dumber? Did he, no, he's standing still, but everybody else is moving away from him. That's what happens when you do assessment. Test scores are a function of luck and skill. Luck has two components, content and process.
So this is just my personal opinion, I guess, prior to the pandemic happening and technology become a huge part of what we do. It seems like prior to the pandemic or prior to 2018 or 19, where we read books, we pulled kids, we worked on the instructional strategies, we did all those great things with our kids. We have this discrepancy?
No, we didn't. It wasn't near as wide as it is now. No, we did not. Kristen, chime in, and Tanya. We started seeing the gap during the digital divide during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's because now it's like what everybody else has said. It's the districts, I feel like, are looking for the next best app to use as the intervention model.
We're looking for the silver bullet.
Yeah.
We're looking.
So it's basically teaching them how to use a device.
Yeah, the golden ticket. We're looking for the solution to the problem that it's just out there. If we can just find it, if we can just find it, it's out there that'll solve all of our problems. No, there's nothing that beats good teaching and learning. Now back to test scores are a function of skill and luck. I won't teach you about luck tonight. Regression to the mean. I won't teach you that one tonight. But here's what I will explain to you. If all you're doing is teaching kids how to take the test, they'll initially make a few gains, but then it will regress back to the mean and they'll actually do worse. If you want kids to do better on the math test, here's a novel idea. Teach them more math, not just how to manipulate the test and how to eliminate choices. That's guessing. That's luck, folks. Tanya, we're going to go to you, then I'm going to remind me to tell you about retesting. Just 1 second.
Okay, so on Monday, our K-5 teachers had a staff meeting. They're rethinking their small groups to help with
you hurt the team.
Yes, I don't hate. So this went out to all 4th and 5th grade parents on Class Dojo from the teacher. And I just I was like, what do they mean by that? But I'm just gonna read it. Starting this week, students are required to complete a minimum of 4 iReady teacher assigned lessons called homework. It's 2 for math and 2 for reading. The lessons that will be completed are targeted for the student. These will be monitored and used for evaluation purposes. So they're supposed to do it at home
Yeah,
as
evaluation
homework,
purposes. That
right?
oh,
But
this is
so
awful.
it was in the tier 2. It was one of their 15-minute small groups was a technology. So they're putting that on the parents to make sure to monitor, and that their parents encourage your parents to get at least parents encourage your student to get at least an 80% on the iReady assessment. And I'm like, okay, how did I I I don't understand.
That's not reliable data.
Well,
It-
but even
I
if
mean, the
you have
data
it,
is reliable unless the parent
it's just
is
not
doing the,
actionable
yeah,
unless you do something
Parents
with
do
it.
the work for your child.
yes.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it's not actionable unless you know,
And if you're doing small groups, you're actually gonna probably, I mean, you're gonna know if they're learning it, because
yeah, but
if they're not the one learning it and their scores are going up, somebody else is taking a test for them. Somebody
yeah,
else is doing the iReady.
somebody else is doing that. How do you know who's doing it? So,
So that bothers me, but I'm not a classroom teacher.
yeah, but it
So
ought to bother you. So,
yeah,
so I have a friend who's VP at Gardner Webb. I know you're shocked that I have friends, but one of my better friends at the college is VP for institutional effectiveness, you know, the Geek Squad. So I'm always hanging out with them since I did quantitative. And he volunteered to teach a class last spring in anatomy and physiology. And he inherited the shell that had been built for him. It's a graduate level course. And he wanted me to help him with the shell because I'm a shell builder. I'm a master shell builder. I build all the ones that y'all use in this program and a couple of doctoral programs. But anyway, and I said, this ought to be criminal. He said, what are you talking about? I said, there's no way to give students feedback. They had them set up on every assessment in the class was set up on auto grade, where the instructor never had to see what the kids did or didn't do. How in the world do you know, assessment drives instruction. And if you're doing, if you're not using that assessment information, you then take it and go and plan your instruction. Now I know this is going to be one of those you said, Dale, you tell whoppers. You see my red book. I take notes all week long on your work, and that's what drives my instruction. Remember tonight when I said I've missed this piece because I'm seeing that y'all aren't putting names in? That's on me. And I tell you the good stuff that you do, but I assess every piece of work you do. You've noticed there's nothing of mine that's on Respondus, auto grade, or any of that. I want to see your work because that's going to drive I've actually got a lesson plan for tonight. I know that's hard to believe too, but that's what teaching is. And what we're doing is we're taking the teaching out of teaching. We're weighing them, but we're not feeding them. So what? They go home and take 4 iReady tests. What are we doing with that? Nothing. And how do we know they're taking it, number one? But number two, what are we doing with it? We're just weighing them to be weighing them. So at the end of the year, when your kids take your state exam, and the ones that are within 5 points get to do the retest the next day, right? Standard practice. Do we really think that they're going to learn anything overnight? Well, I mean, you could have them sleep with the textbook under their pillow and see if they can get it by osmosis, but I don't think it'll work. If it would, I've tried that myself. Didn't help me. So don't tell me that luck's not a part of it. What are we hoping they'll be the next day? We're hoping they'll guess better and be luckier. That's the process of the test. They won't know any more math on Wednesday than they did on Tuesday. We're just hoping for luck. That's what a lot of these computerized assessment, we're just hoping that we're going to teach them how to guess rather than actually teach them. All right, now, I've had principals who have argued that we should be able to count those retests in our overall proficiency in terms of the percent proficient, that we should be able to count those. And there's a very valid reason why we don't allow that. Again, back to regression to the mean. But the reason why we can't count those kids who passed on the retest, because all we did was give them a chance to be lucky. And the reason why that's not valid is we didn't give the kids that just passed by 3 or 4 points the chance to be unlucky. Think about that one for a moment. You got 100 kids that take the test. 50 of them were proficient and 50 of them weren't. We retested 10 that were just close. We didn't retest the 10 that just barely made it. So over time, probability would tell you the same percentage will pass and fail over time. It just won't be the same kids. Some kids will get lucky on the second administration, and if we made them take it again, some kids will get unlucky. So luck is a part of it, but you can't base your instruction on luck. And that's what too many people are doing now. They're looking for the silver bullet. They're trying to get lucky. That's hope. Hope is not a plan. You will not last as a principal if your instructional strategy for your school, your culture of teaching and learning is based on luck or hope or trying to find the silver bullet. It's teaching and learning. You want to create a culture of teaching and learning. If you'll remember last semester when we got to the APTEL, the whole notion of Big E and Little E empowerment, I wrote it on the board at DPI today. I don't care. That crazy old man, I wrote it on the board today. If you want schools to get better, you got to create a culture of teaching and learning. And you don't do that by having them guess or try to get lucky or hope or sending homework assignments home that you don't know if they're doing them or not. And even if they are doing them, nobody's following up and doing anything with it. This is all bad practice, folks. That's the notion here. This is all very bad practice. We know how to get better test scores, and you got to work. But I hear all this now, the younger generation, and it's not just the younger generation, wanting a work-life balance. What that means is I'd like for you to pay me, but I'd like to work less and none at all if I could help it. But I was surprised. I did a research project in a small Western county with only 14 principals, my doctoral students. And even a lady who said this, and she might probably not as old as me, but she's got to be close. I've seen her. She ain't no spring chicken. That's being pejorative and ugly, but I can say that because I'm an old man. But she was talking about she didn't like having many hours she had to spend being a principal now. She wanted to spend more time with her grandchildren. Well, retire and go home then. Here's an idea. Retire and go home if you want to spend more time with your grandkids. But you're not getting the job done because now all of a sudden you've decided that you want to be like the young people and have a work-life balance and work about 35 or 40 hours a week. That's folks, you got to get after it. You got to get your teachers. I'm not talking about working night and day, but you got to work when you're working. When we work hard. When we play hard kind of thing. I'm just telling you, I'm just not sure that we're not. I just don't think we're holding teachers accountable to work hard the time that we got them. I'm not saying they have to stay till midnight every night, but when we got them, they got to be working. And we know some basics about school. Instruction is driven by assessment, but assessment, just feeding them, weighing them is of no good if we don't do anything with that assessment data. If we don't make it actionable, it's no good. It's just no good. Sorry, it just isn't. And so I could sit here and tell you, I could show you how to do regressions, how to do analysis of variance, how to do repeated measures. I mean, we could do all kinds of things statistically, and I could show you that this stuff's not hard, or it's not rocket science, folks. We know what gets good test scores, and it's good quality instruction. You know, the adequate way to do it and the adequate amount of time. We aren't serving EC kids nearly as well because we're saving money. We're not serving our kids in intervention because, again, you know, it takes time to do tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. It's easier to put them on the computer. We're sending kids home to do work on the computer, and we're not even doing anything with it. They're just turning it in for a grade. What's the purpose? You know, when I was an elementary principal, I banned homework. I banned homework as an elementary. I don't see the value in homework. I just don't. I'm just, you know, I'm not. But again, I'm a statistician by trade, and the research is clear. Homework is is the only value that homework has is harmful. That's what the numbers say. Now, you know, I let all the teacher assistants go except in kindergarten and reduced class size as well. You can imagine how popular I was. But we tore the top off test scores though. But some people that didn't matter to. Their aunt didn't have a job as a teacher assistant. That was more important than kids learning. That's why when I arrived at that school, there were 14 elementary schools in that district, and we were number 14. And when I left and went to the central office, we were number 5. But people were still angry at me. They wanted my head on a stick because their grandma didn't have a job as a teacher assistant anymore, or their cousin. We can't run schools as employment agencies, you know. Our job is to make a good number go up or a bad number go down. Now, in the intervening time, we're now doing, you know, we're doing accountability. But I was a little ahead of the curve. My second year there is when we started accountability before the state report card. But we knew it was coming. And so I was making plans that we were going to, when we got going, we were going to go. But again, don't think that everybody will share in your success or revel or be happy in your success if it costs one of their friends or relatives something. That's part of it too. Or if we ask people to work hard. So it's lonely at the top, folks. It's a hard job for principals, but you have to understand what you're there for every day. The EC is a hard one. I've got a really good that Dr. Sane made. I've got an eye on the time here. I want to show you this, and we're going to be done. And I'm only going to show you one. I'm going to go through it quickly. I don't read PowerPoints to you, but I'm going to show this one. Dr. Sane put this one together. I think it is exceptional. He's done a really good job with it. Again, if you don't know this is a long one, kind of long and drawn out. Let me see the one I want right here. This is Josh Sane's. What you should know, and we've summarized this when he goes through all of it. Policies, he goes FAPE, child find. Everybody knows that you got to find all the kids in your district, even if they're in private or homeschool. If they're not, and make sure they're getting services. Least restrictive environment, continuum of alternative placements. That's what we're talking about. There is no problem with kids getting more than one of these. For some reason, people think if kids get an intervention, he shouldn't get EC or vice versa. That is not true. You have to provide a continuum according to what they need. That's where this comes from. Continuum of alternate placements. Placement decisions, IEP team. Don't hold IEP team meetings if key stakeholders can't be there. Don't be grabbing people out of the hallway. Don't be doing that. LEA rep should always be present, involved in the team decision, but just one. If the principal and AP are there, you can't bait the field here. You can't unbalance the vote by bringing more administrators, so you have more browbeating and more voting. If 2 are there, 1 needs to hush. Children in private school, you got to go get them. Child find. Parental consent, referrals, initial. Now remember, back to, I think Sean and Jeff work in Charlotte Mecklenburg. You can look it up. In 2014, 11 elementary principals were fired the week before school started because they were not doing the 90 days before the EC testing. They were simply, when kids would get referred for testing, they'd have them tested immediately. They were doing that and some other things. You say, well, what if a parent requests it? Well, what they were basically doing is you request this testing or we're going to put your kid out of school. They were doing some of that kind of stuff, and they were changing placements for more than 10 days and not doing the paperwork. There was a lot of nasty stuff, and so 11 got fired the week school started. Initial evals, evaluation, again, for head count, you got to make sure that you do your reevals for your existing ones. If not, they drop off the head count, you lose your money. MTSS, RTI, specific learning disability, they've got to be compliant, intervention, progress monitor. That's what I'm talking about. When they start getting interventions at tier 2, it has to be compliant with EC policy, just like their EC kids. Right here it is. Now you see all these nice slides that he made. It's got all the important stuff highlighted. What a great job he's done. Procedural safeguards, manifestation termination. Now remember, within 10 days of a change of placement, the IEP team. Now, there's a caveat to that, and I've told you that before in discipline. And you got to remember, if they're showing a pattern, what is a manifestation? When a kid, you say, is that a manifestation of that kid's disability? What is the Well, that means he's doing the same thing over and over again because he can't help it, because that's part of his disability. So the third time a kid does the same thing, does it matter that you've only suspended him for 2 or 3 days? No, it does not. You should start the paperwork, the DEC 5 functional behavior assessment, updated IEP, updated psychological. You should do all the paperwork and see if that's part of that kid's disability. That's what you've got to do, folks. And this is the slide I made. You can see the difference. His slide's much better than mine. What I want to say about this one is this. If that kid's butt is not in his regular seat, that's a change in placement. I don't care if he's down the hall. I don't care if he's still in the building. I don't care if he's in school, out of school. It does not matter. By federal definition, if his butt's not in his seat today, you have changed his placement. You've got to understand that. And that's when you get caught up in that you violated, the 10-day rule. Because the kids' butts, they think, well, it's only out of school suspension, and I've got 10 days that I can play. It's not. If you move him, if he's not in his regular seat, then it's a change in placement, and you don't get 10 times. If he's showing a pattern of the same behavior the third time, he goes to the front of the line, folks. This is the one that gets you more than anything else on EC. Because remember, you got people that it's their job to do all the compliance stuff and to teach and do all that. Where you get caught up in is on the discipline end, when you don't understand what a change of placement is and you don't want to do that paperwork, and you end up getting thrashed. That's the deal. All right. Questions you have for me? This is a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of good things in there. Again, I don't read PowerPoints. You're grown people, you can read them, but I appreciate you participating tonight. We've covered all the things that we need to, but you got to get into EC because you're going to be that LEA rep. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to know the basics of how it works and what you've got at your school so that you can ask specific questions about that. All right. Anybody have anything else for the good of the group tonight? I'm sorry I've run over, but I told you EC night's always long, and I try to be as fast as I can. We stayed on until 9:30 last night, but that was group was doing a presentation. All right. I'm looking forward to case study 3 next week. Everybody have a good week, and again, keep turning that work in. I love to read your work. I read it every day. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you.